So let me just begin by saying that this time is for you, and I want to talk today about the 9 secrets to thriving. And I have been on a journey. The journey that I've been on is a journey around the world, over 35,000 miles, where I've interviewed 50 of the world's most resilient people, people who've faced trauma and challenges of all kinds, and who nevertheless are thriving. And what I want to do is to share with you 3 of the 9 secrets today that we have learned from these 50 incredible people. But first of all, before we begin, I'd love you to give yourself a score, because the name of this talk is to thrive every day. And I want you to give yourself a score out of 10. 10 being, I absolutely thrive every day. 1 being, I rarely ever thrive in a minute, never mind a full day. So if you've got a pen or pencil handy, just give yourself a score out of 10 for the extent to which you currently thrive every day. And let's look at the objectives for the session today. So this time is for you. This is a very different session to the other 3 sessions that you've had. It's absolutely about looking inside to see what changes you could make to get more out of yourself in every moment and every day to overcome those challenges that we all face every day. So my big question is, what could you do to become more resilient and thrive in the face of both large and small challenges? I'm going to share some of the stories of those people that I met on my journey around the world with you. When I share their stories are about significant challenge or trauma, but the one thing that they told me was that those same habits that enable them to thrive over and in spite of the adversity are the very same secrets to thriving that they use to face challenges large and small every single day. So I hope you'll be inspired by the stories, but also I really want you to apply the secrets that I'm going to share with you. So as I said, I've travelled over 35,000 miles to meet these wonderful people. I have made videos of my interviews with them, and I'll tell you at the end of our talk today how you can get access and meet some of these people that I'm going to talk to you about by video. So the first question that I have been asked by so many people in connection with this project is, are we born resilient, or is it a habit that we can learn? What we know from neuroscience is that every single one of us is born with a resilient set point, and that is something we inherit from our parents. Our resilient circuitry is just on the left-hand side of our left eye, so just near our frontal lobe in our brain. And we inherit a resilient circuitry depending on the extent to which the resilient circuitry of our parents has grown throughout their lifetime. But that's not to say that those of us with a low resilient set point cannot build our resilience. We absolutely can. What we know for sure through neuroscientific research is the really exciting truth that we can develop habits to thrive every single day. And the question I had in my mind as part of my coaching practice, as part of my own personal experience, as part of working with people who face adversity is, why do some people thrive in the face of adversity while others barely survive? And that's how this project, the Global Resilience Project, was born. I wanted to speak to people who have faced challenge and trauma of 50 different kinds, each of whom were thriving, to understand if there were common resilience strategies or secrets to thriving that each of these thrivers used that were common across their experience. And first of all, I had to be really clear about what thriving is. And there's a psychological definition of thriving, which is our ability to bounce forward in the face of adversity. So if you have a fallout with your boss, your thriving score arises from how quickly you're able to bounce forward. So not bounce back, but bounce forward, because bouncing back is getting back to where we were before the adversity or challenge occurred. Bouncing forward is learning something about ourselves and our ability to thrive in the face of that adversity. So reflecting on what has happened and understanding how we can adjust our responses in order to deal better with that scenario the next time it comes around. So thriving is very different from surviving, which is bouncing back. Thriving is about bouncing forward. So when I ask you, what do you need to thrive every day? It's what do you need to learn and grow in the face of the challenges that we all meet every day. Now, the really exciting truth that started to emerge from the work I was doing with these thrivers is that there are 9 common secrets to thriving shared across all of these different thrivers' experience, and that these thrivers told me that they thrived every day. Now, I want to just segue off for a minute. I've been told by the organisers here at CCA that in the last 3 sessions, no one has used the chat. And I want to break that pattern. I want us to develop our first habit, and that is the habit of sharing what we feel, sharing the insights that we have. And I won't name your name, but what I'd love you to do is when I talk about these secrets and you think, you know what, I'm going to try that, I'm going to develop that as a habit, I want you to just rattle out a little chat to me and tell me what your habit is. And I will share that habit with others, because what we want to do is really encourage one another to start doing something different today that will increase our Thrive score. As Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, then that's a definition of insanity. So there are 9 secrets to thriving. I only have time to share 3 of them with you today. So I want to get started. The one promise I make to you, though, is that the secrets to thriving I'm going to share all involve things which are directly within your control. So let's talk about what your definition of success is. Now, as a society, we're so focused on the external trappings of success, the car, the house, the job, the role. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the feeling you have when you lay your head on the pillow at night and think, that was a damn fine day. What is it and how is it that you would define success? For me, my definition of success is the peace of mind attained from attempting to be the best of which I'm capable in every interaction. I fail at that frequently, but the wonderful thing about my definition of success is there's always another moment coming along later so that I can again try to be successful by my own definition. And one of the challenges I've set for you after this session is for you to come up with your own intrinsic definition of success, and that means not the external trappings. Research says that if we identify what success means in terms of our internal motivations, then we're much more likely to be content every single day. So that's your first challenge. And if anybody's already written down their definition of success and wants to share it with me on the chat, please feel free to do that. So secret number one. Secret number 1 is that we all need support. But what my thrivers have told me is that support means specific things. And first of all, we need support in order to get to acceptance of a problem or a challenge or an adversity. Many of you will be familiar with the change curve and the Kubler-Ross curve, which identifies the various stages that we go through when we face major adversity or challenge. And some of these stages also exist when we face more minor adversity or challenge. So the stages are on the screen for you. You can see them now. So if we look at the more minor end, I had a session this morning with someone who had a disagreement with their line manager and was very much stuck in the place of anger. And we all know, we've got colleagues and we do this ourselves, where we just keep talking about why it is they're wrong and we're right. And we chew the cud until we just keep reigniting all the emotions, the anger and the shock. We need to get past that if we want to solve the problem. And certainly when I'm coaching, my main focus is how can I get this person to an acceptance? Because it's only once we get to an acceptance of the facts as they are that we can start to identify the problem and therefore the solution to the problem. So when I talk about acceptance, I am not talking about just accepting the situation as it is, submission. I am talking about getting through all of the pointless shock, denial, fear, anger, bargaining, depression. It's natural, but we need to move through that quite quickly and not keep feeding it by talking about the past or the conversation. but rather move through that to the point of acceptance, because that's the point at which we take action. That's the point at which we focus on what it is we can control rather than all of the things we can't control. The one common factor that these previous emotional states have is that we're focusing on what we can't control. So we want to be empowered. And all of the thrivers agree with me. They say that acceptance phase is the beginning of change. That's the beginning of thriving. So you will not thrive unless you get to the point of acceptance. And I mean acceptance even in the most minor terms. You know, if you're sitting at a set of traffic lights and going, for God's sake, why don't these lights change? That's not acceptance. That's trying to deal with something that's outside of your control. It's a flippant example, but a powerful one nevertheless. Now, I want to share my first thriver story with you, which is a story about Paul Smith. And Paul Smith is a fellow Scot. He was the Scottish bodybuilding champion, and he was a Scottish martial arts champion. Paul is an incredible guy, lots of focus, lots of determination. And in March 2017, Paul was diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And when I interviewed Paul in April, at the end of March it was this year, his motor neuron disease had advanced quite significantly to the point where he was struggling to do the interview because his throat muscles had given way. And as he says, he can't brush his teeth, he can't turn the page of a book. But Paul had a lot to say about acceptance, and he wanted me to make it clear on his behalf that what he has to say doesn't just apply to those people who are facing major challenge like he is. He said that initially he would not accept his diagnosis of motor neuron disease. He fought against it, and that made his condition worse. But the moment that he accepted the facts of the diagnosis, he was able to find some level of peace with that, and then to ask himself the question, what can I control? And the answer that he came to was, I can control my mind. I can control my thoughts, and I can control my perspective on this disease. And I can control my determination, which is to stay alive long enough for the medical world to find a cure for motor neuron disease so that I can help others with this disease. And the moment he got to the acceptance, he said he found peace, and every day he spent a significant amount of time visualizing himself healthy and well, and his cells regrouping. He visualizes himself helping others with motor neuron disease. And even though he has stage 3, or type 3, I should say, motor neuron, which is the most aggressive form, he is still, whilst he's degenerating, he is still alive and is already living longer than the diagnosis. Now, I'm not a medical expert. I can only rely on what Paul tells me, and the peace and determination that he's found through acceptance of his condition. So for me, if he can find that in a place of motor neuron disease, one of the cruelest diseases I believe that we can come across, then I can find that when I hit the challenges in my day. I want to get to that point of acceptance, because acceptance means control, and it means I can take action toward a solution. Also within the ambit of support, we have the wonderful Jaco Van Gast, who said it's really important that we all are acutely aware of our own individual strengths and our own individual weaknesses, so that we can build around us a team of people who can shore up our weaknesses and with whom we can share our strengths, so that we shore up their weaknesses. And we need to do that very deliberately. Now, Jaco was a para in the para regiment in Afghanistan, and he had his left arm blown off. You'll see from the picture he's wearing a prosthetic, and he also lost a chunk of body mass and a big chunk from his left leg. And his dream was to be in the para regiment, and obviously he wasn't able to return after his injuries, and he had to come to acceptance. He talks a lot about acceptance too of that. But Jaco was one of the Walking with the Wounded who walked to the North Pole. And the Walking with the Wounded team were all ex-military, each of whom had had very significant injuries, and each of whom shared different strengths and different weaknesses. And for Jacko, he said if he'd got frostbite on his right hand and lost his hand, that would have been a significant impact for him. So they, as a team, very deliberately looked at physically what strengths and weaknesses they had, and mentally what strengths and weaknesses they had, and sewed together a very strong team, explicitly talking about how they could support one another by supporting one another's weaknesses rather than by talking about one another's strengths. Continuing on the theme of support, I also want to share with you that this is backed up by research as well as by the interview we did with Scott Mann, and maybe some of you can identify with this. When we feel stressed, when we feel under pressure, the human instinct is to isolate ourselves. It's to cut ourselves off from those around us. We get quieter and we take action. We don't naturally talk about our problems. And as I say, that's backed up by research. But Scott Mann, who was a Green Beret, and Green Beret in the States, for some of you who don't know, they're part of the secret mission group who go in and infiltrate the Taliban. So very, very dangerous missions Scott was involved in. And in the Green Beret, he was a command leader. So he would take men into the middle of the Taliban, infiltrate them, live as co-Taliban, with a view to defeating the enemy. And Scott lost 23 of his men through a number of missions, and he would become very stressed. He would feel a lot of guilt about the death of those men because he knew it was his decisions that had taken them to their death. And he noticed a very strong instinct he had to isolate himself and to separate himself. And he realised that when he did that, he became weaker. He didn't thrive. He barely even survived. And in order to thrive, he said he had to deliberately seek out the company of people whom he could trust, the support of people whom he could trust, and share his feelings with them about what it was he was struggling with. Bjorn Ihler also says the same thing. Now, Bjorn was nearly killed in the Utoya Island attack. You'll remember a number of years ago now on the Norwegian island, Utoya, Anders Breivik, the gunman, infiltrated a labour camp, youth labour camp weekend, and he killed 63 people, having blown up a building in Oslo already. And Bjorn Ihler was one of those whom he almost killed, one of the many whom he almost killed. Now, Bjorn talked about a moment when he was in the water wearing a big woolen jumper, and the weight of the water was being saturated by his jumper and pulling him down, and Bjorn couldn't swim. And he was in the course of rescuing an 8-year-old and 9-year-old boy, and he looked up, and Anders Breivik lifted his gun, and he looked into Anders Breivik's eyes, and Anders Breivik pulled the trigger. And Bjorn said that he ducked, but he heard the bullet go by his ear, and he ducked into the water with the boys, and Anders Breivik obviously thought that he'd shot him dead. You can imagine the post-traumatic stress that Bjorn suffered. He says the most significant help, the thing, if he were to single out one from a number of things that enabled him to thrive after such a traumatic event, was the ability to talk to others who had been involved in the Utoya Island attack and who had almost been killed. But not just there, he also found a lot of comfort in friends whom he got to know who'd been involved in bombings in Northern Ireland. So anyone who had been through a terrorist attack, faced a near-death experience, he found a huge amount of comfort. And what he says is, even now as a campaigner, he will, when he faces a challenge or trauma during the course of a day, a smaller one, he will immediately go and find someone who will recognise that difficulty that he's facing so that he can talk to them. So having support of others who really understand what we've been to, and of course we now have the #MeToo movement, which actually was barely beginning at the time when I interviewed Bjorn in autumn last year. So support is a jigsaw puzzle. That's what we're hearing consistently from all of our thrivers. It's really important for us to be very conscious about who we have around us, to support us. And also something that's coming out of the research is having a mentor is incredibly helpful to enabling us to thrive, because choosing a mentor is someone who is a few steps further down the road of the path we want to travel. And when we have a mentor like that, we thrive because we start to see in ourselves common strengths, and we start to see the possibility that we too can achieve what that mentor has achieved. It brings a reality to the goals that we've set ourselves. Another thing that Scott Mann shared in our interview with him was that a way to thrive when you're facing difficulty or challenge is to help others. So take the focus off yourself and very deliberately go and ask how you can be of help to others. In his world as a Green Beret, when they were doing missions where they would be without food for many, many hours, or people would be injured, he would take the focus off his own pain, his own hunger, his own guilt, his own trauma, by asking his colleagues how they were doing, and then really actively listening to how they were doing and what they were feeling. I want to just finish this first secret off by talking about Kenyatta Leal, a truly remarkable guy who lives in San Francisco. Now, Kenyatta grew up with a number of challenges in gangs in California, in San Diego, where he grew up. And at the age of 25, Kenyatta was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison under the California three-strike rule because he was found with a shotgun in the boot of his car. So Kenyatta enters prison at the age of 25, not knowing whether he was ever going to be released from there. And he said for the first 5 years, he blamed everyone. He blamed the judge, he blamed his teachers, he blamed his parents, he blamed the gangs, he blamed everyone but himself for landing in prison. And when he was on a call to a friend for the umpteenth time, he was almost 30, and his friend said to him, "Look, Kenyatta, you are where you are because of the sum total of the choices that you have made." And Kenyatta said that really landed with him. That's acceptance. He really accepted his role in the location that he found himself at. And that really struck me when I interviewed him, that many of us are keen to blame others or circumstances for where we are, but until we truly accept our role in where we are, whether it's in a dispute with a member of the team or an issue we have with our family or something larger, then we can't really start to take responsibility for moving forward. And he did. He said at that point, he spoke to one of the wise men in the prison, and he said, "Help me move my life forward, help me thrive." And this wise man, as he was known, said, "I want you to write down all the things in life that you value and ask yourself, if you sleep 8 hours a night, if you work 8 hours a day, and you have 8 hours left, how many of those remaining 8 hours are you using to advance the things that you say you value in life?" And he realised that the things he valued, education, community, family, were things that he hadn't spent enough time focusing on. And so he determined that even if he never got out of prison, he would create a community for himself, he would give himself an education, and he would make amends with his family. And through all of that, Kenyatta says that he very deliberately chose supporters of him in the prison, people who shared his values, who shared his vision, but he also very deliberately selected challengers, people who would be prepared to say to him, "You are getting too big for your boots," or "You're feeling sorry for yourself." Because that challenger that said to him at the age of almost 30, "You are where you are because of the sum total of the choices you've made," was the challenger that saved his life. And so it's really important, if we want to thrive, that we choose challengers. So I want to move on to the second secret. I love the quote of Sam Owen: "How we care for ourselves gives our brain messages that shape our self-worth, so we must care for ourselves in every way, every day." My question for you is, what do you do to care for yourself? Give yourself a score out of 10. Now, I do want to remind you that some of you should have written down, or hopefully all of you have written down, a habit that you want to ritualise out of the secret number one. So remember and drop me a chat and let me know what promise you've made to yourself to enable you to thrive. And let's turn to self-care. So, looking at this secret number one, really important for all of us to have very conscious wellness priorities. And I am very clear about my own wellness priorities. I'm clear about what my first priority is, what my second priority is, and so on, so that I know, depending on my diary and the other pressures, if my first priority is always get enough sleep, then if I can get enough sleep, that's what I'll focus on. If I have enough time to sleep and exercise, etc., that's what I'll focus on. So to what extent are you really clear about your wellness priorities? There's a really wonderful study done by Tel Aviv University where they took 18 people and deprived them of sleep for one night. And then they put them under a TMS just to give them a scan and gave them a number of exercises to do as compared with another group who'd had a good night's sleep. And their conclusions from the study was something I think we all know anecdotally, and that is that lack of sleep impacts on our judgment. But more importantly, I think it makes us react more emotionally to difficult situations, but also to relatively neutral situations. That's the key finding came out of the study, that the 18 people were reacting emotionally even to relatively neutral challenges that they were facing. So sleep, that's why sleep's my number one priority, because I know if I get that, then I'm better able to be successful by my own definition during the course of each day. There's also a wonderful study done with Israeli judges. I do a lot of training with judges, and I always share this study with them. So Israeli parole judges sit between 10 and 4 each day, and they have submissions made to them by solicitors on behalf of their clients who are in prison. And what those solicitors are doing are making submissions to the judges to grant parole for their clients. And what this really interesting study showed was that if you made your submission at 10 o'clock in the morning when the judge was just on the bench and pretty fresh, you had a 65% chance of your parole application being granted. If, however, you made your application in the minutes leading up to lunchtime, 1 o'clock, so in the hour before lunchtime, your 65% chance reduced to, wait for it, 0. So a 0% chance of your parole application being granted. And then after lunch, the judges came back on at 2 o'clock, and that prospect went back up to 65%, and then by 4 o'clock had reduced back down to 0%, which I find astonishing, but of course it's completely natural, because when we get hungry, when our glucose levels diminish, we become much more risk averse, and so it's easier to remain with the status quo than it is to make a decision which, along with which there's a risk, because we're moving away from the status quo. So nourishment is really important, nutrition is really important. Choosing food, for those of you that have just had white bread with meat in a sandwich for lunch, I reckon you're probably falling asleep by about now, because your blood sugar level will have peaked and it will be falling rapidly, so your ability to concentrate diminishes. So what you put in your body is really important. And there's a lot of studies around something called keystone habits. You'll perhaps have heard of those, and this was very much backed up in our interview with the Thrivers, and in particular Scott Mann spoke a lot about this. All you need to do is choose one thing. So one wellness habit. That might be going for a 20-minute walk 4 times a week. It might be sleeping 8 hours a night. It might be taking half an hour out to do something for yourself once a day. Just one habit is all you need. And that habit becomes your keystone habit. If you just focus on that habit, then it has a positive ripple effect, so that you're much more likely to make better choices in other unrelated areas of your life. So what's the one wellness habit that you're going to adopt to create that virtuous ripple effect? Exercise. We always hear about exercise, and we know statistically that only 8% of New Year's resolutions that are made are actually kept. A whopping 92% are broken. And of course, most of those New Year's resolutions are about joining the gym. I wish you were all in front of me so I could ask you to raise your hand to see who said they would go to the gym and that's already fallen away long since, and we're only in May. But what loads of our thrivers said was that exercise actually becomes really important as a stress release, because if you don't really stress, then you recycle it. It builds up, and of course we all know how it impacts on your adrenal glands, why your liver's not able to process adrenaline, what happens to your cortisol levels. There are very important physical reasons to exercise, but finding exercise that gives you joy is really important. So joining the gym when you don't want to go to the gym, don't do it. Find exercise that you find pleasant and enjoyable and do that. The other self-care, critical self-care tip that came through our study was to set boundaries and ask for what you need. Be really clear about what you need. I had an interesting coaching session yesterday where a coaching client began telling me that this other person should know, any decent human being should know that, and this other person should have taken certain actions. Now, whenever I hear the word should, it's like a red flag for me, because should means that we expect other people to read our minds. And if we expect other people to read our minds, it's because we've not been explicit about what we need from them. So please be explicit, set boundaries, and get into the habit of asking for what you need. Be explicit about that, and please don't expect other people to have read your rule book. Cortney Donelson did that. Cortney and Mark Donelson were married for 13 years, happily, or so Cortney thought. They had 2 children, and then one day Mark told her, I say one day, it was actually over a series of 9 days, 9 very traumatic days for Cortney, that he had had several affairs during their 13 years of marriage, that he was addicted to porn, and in short, their marriage and he was not at all what she thought he was, or their marriage was. And so began a whole recovery process when ultimately Cortney and Mark managed to work through their struggles. But Cortney says a turning point for her was to sit down and work out what was it practically she needed from Mark in order to feel like she could start to trust him again. And she had a long list, as you might imagine, one of which was things like access to his mobile phone, knowing his PIN code, and being able to, and for him to leave the mobile phone on the kitchen table, and for her to be able to check that. And she didn't expect him to know any of that. She was very explicit. She said that's a turning point in her thriving in the face of that, of the breakdown of their marriage. Angie Mozilo, now, she says one of the critical issues to self-care is when you are facing challenge, when you're overcoming challenge, no matter how large or small, stay away from those drama makers. You know who I'm talking about, the people who want to have a good gas about how difficult it is, or why they shouldn't have done that, or how badly they feel. Angie says stay away, and Angie should know because her husband, when she was 3 months pregnant, paid 2 hitmen to kill his father. And the first Angie knew about it was when the police turned up at her door to arrest her husband. And you can imagine how what turmoil that set her life in. And in order to thrive in the face of that, not just survive it, Angie had to very deliberately move away from the drama makers, move away from the vampires, as she called them, so that she set boundaries around who she was prepared to engage with and who she wasn't. And I can certainly apply that very easily to my own life, and I hope that you can. Another self-care tip came from Bobbi Huffman, and she said, do what you love. And a lot of our thrivers said that, you know, find something that you really love to do and make sure you get to do that every week, several times a month, because it fills you up. Bobbi's husband, Will, committed suicide, and she was with him for 32 years. She thought they were very close. She knew he was struggling with things, but she didn't know how badly he was suffering, and so it came as a huge shock when the police told them that they had found Will hanging from an oak tree in their favourite park. And I just want to segue into these wonderful people who are coming in and telling me what habits are. So thank you for telling me that you want to accept facts quickly and focus on moving forward, to see yourself achieving set targets and seek support from mentors. Love that. And someone else saying that they definitely want to invest that 8 hours left in a day after work and sleep on their own values. Oh, me too, I love that one. Family and self-development. So thank you for that. Keep them coming in. Now, Kia Scherr, wonderful woman. Kia said you've got to take a break when you need one, because if you don't take a break, people aren't going to get the best out of you. And Kia should know, because her husband Alan and her 13-year-old daughter Naomi were on a meditation trip in Mumbai when the Mumbai terrorist attacks occurred. And they were seated at a table in a restaurant in the Oberoi Hotel when the gunman came in and started shooting indiscriminately at the diners. And very sadly, both Alan and Naomi were shot dead during that attack. And Kia was in Florida looking after her mother when she got the call to say, switch on the television. And the Mumbai attack was going on, and that was on the Wednesday afternoon, and she didn't learn until the Friday that both Alan and Naomi had been killed. And she's an extraordinary woman who said, look, these gunmen were extremists who had been brainwashed. And through all of that, she kept looking after herself and saying, do I need a break? Do I need to take time out? Do I need to fill myself up? Because I've got to stay strong, and the only way I can stay strong is by looking after my own needs first and foremost. And I imagine that resonates with a lot of you. I know I've got a habit of just keeping going. I'll just do one more thing. I'll just deal with one more email, even when I'm exhausted. Well, I did until I spoke to people like Kia, and I knew that it's important. Even 5 minutes out can be transformative. And Kim Honeycutt talks about something very similar. She says, don't make decisions when you're feeling HALT. And that's hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Kim grew up with a very overbearing mother who treated her badly, both physically and verbally. She's an extraordinary woman with a very, very sharp sense of humour. And she has a lot of wisdom to share, and that was one of the aspects of self-care she was very keen to share with the Thriver community that we're building. And I just want to share something else that's come in. Mentors in the office, a great idea, not always your manager, but someone who sets good examples and you would strive to be like. Yes, I completely agree, and in fact I would suggest that the mentor shouldn't be your manager. Your manager can be there to do something else. Go find a separate mentor and build a close and inspiring relationship with them. So let's deal with a piece of advice that comes from Aidan Berzins. Now, Aidan is a male transsexual, so born as a female, and he said right from the very beginning that there was something different about him. And he was brought up by a relatively religious family in the United States. And by the age of 14 or 15, he knew he was trans. He was going to have to transition to become a man. And at the age of 17, he plucked up the courage to tell his parents that he was going to present as a man. He was going to become a trans male. And his parents' response was to kick him out of the house. He became homeless. He attempted suicide. He obviously struggled with anxiety and depression, and it was his uncle whom he eventually reached out to who got him to see a therapist. And he said the one piece of advice that my therapist gave me, she gave me lots of pieces of advice, but the one that really saved my life was for me to talk compassionately to myself, that what goes on in my head is the most important thing, because I'm with myself 24 hours a day. And I learned, he said, to speak compassionately to myself, to drown out those voices that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't fit, and to really appreciate all of the good things about myself, and to do that internally, because until we appreciate ourselves, we cannot expect other people to appreciate us. And so let me know what your habits are about self-care. What things have you heard that really resonate with you? Or do you have another suggestion maybe that I haven't shared with you? I've only shared some of what our Thrivers said on each topic. They've said lots of things. And you might have a self-care tip you want to share. So drop me a chat if you do. The third secret I want to share with you today, though, is authenticity, something very close to my heart. I love May Sarton's quote, "We have to dare to be ourselves, however frightening or strange that self may prove to be." I think I'm both frightening and strange, but there we go. But what I say genuinely to you is that actually we can't build a meaningful connection with any other human being unless we show up as our true selves. You know that we're also evolved as human beings, that we can tell if someone's projecting an image or putting on a mask, and there's a disconnect there. So if you show up completely as yourself, then you're much more likely to make a connection. After all, as Oscar Wilde says, you've got to be yourself because everyone else is taken. And one of our wonderful contributors on the project, Jackie Jones, talked about the moment when she realised she had not been herself all her life. She was 43 years old when she had that realisation. Now, Jackie's father was overbearing. He was extremely violent. As she was growing up, he would tell her she wasn't good enough. But he was also kind and loving, and so she had this really challenging relationship where on the one hand she felt abused, and on the other hand she felt loved, and so that led to her trusting her father's opinion of her that she wasn't good enough and she didn't amount to anything. And that was a narrative that ran all the way through her life until she was at a course at the age of 43. It was an NLP course where someone talked about living someone else's script. And the penny dropped with Jackie. She realised, I've been living my father's script, or the script my father gave me, which is I'm not good enough. And she spent her whole life up until then trying to project an image of being professional, of knowing everything, of being competent, and it was exhausting. And I've got a picture of a tree here because I talk a lot about authenticity. My first book is called The True You, and I'm going to offer you a free download of it at the end of this session as a reward for making it to the end of the session. But I use the analogy of the tree, and the core belief, the script as Jackie would have it, is the root ball. And if our root ball is disempowering, then our trunk, our neural pathways will reflect that. And then the branches, the thoughts that we have, and the leaves, the feelings that we have will reflect that too. So our branches will break easily, the leaves won't flourish, where the script that we're following is disempowering. And what Jackie did was determine to adopt a much more empowering script, which is, I'm good enough as I am. And that really resonated with me. So wonderfully inspiring thriver in the form of Jackie Jones. So Shannon Moroney, we met Shannon in Toronto, and she was 3 months married, and she was a guidance counsellor. She was away on a course when the police knocked on her bedroom door and said to her that her husband had been arrested because he had kidnapped 2 women the night before and taken them to the home that he and Shannon shared and sexually abused them there and threatened to kill them. And her life changed in that moment. She had done nothing wrong, but she ultimately lost her job. She became the wife of a sex offender and vilified in the press in Canada, and also lost many of her friends and some of her family. And so her life fell apart through no fault of her own. And she said, the thing for me is I had to remain myself all the way through that trauma, to allow the experience to shape me, but not control me, not change fundamentally who I am. She said that was a struggle, but it was really important for me to remain who I was and not allow those experiences to fundamentally change me to become someone who is bitter or vengeful. And Marie Cockburn says, the most important opinion of who you are and how you're doing is your own. Amen to that is what I say. And I'll share a quote, one of my favourite quotes with you on the next slide. But Anne-Marie's daughter, Martha, was 15 when she was given an ecstasy tablet by a 17-year-old guy that she just met through a common friend, and she died 45 minutes later because it was 96% pure. And so that was Anne-Marie's only daughter, Martha, and Anne-Marie is thriving even in the face of Martha's death. And she said that there was a lot of pressure from other parents who'd lost children for her to grieve, for Martha's death to fundamentally change who she is. And she said, I wanted to live and live fully in honour of Martha and the most important opinion of who I was. and how I was doing was my own, and I would not succumb to everyone else's pressure of how I should respond in that particular circumstance. And for me, authenticity is just ensuring what you say, what you do, and what you believe are aligned. That is authenticity. Now, I just want to share a chat. We've got someone who's a big fan of HALT. It's wonderful, isn't it? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, don't make a decision. And we've got someone else who's saying that they'll definitely take away self-care when there are minor stresses in the workplace or in their life. Then they're often quick to try and please other people and put their own welfare on the back burner to either get results or improve team morale. But ultimately that hinders the ability to be effective and productive, and I think that's so true. Thank you for sharing that. Also, there's this tendency to cut ourselves off from friends and family. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let me share this quote that I love with you. David Foster Wallace, in his book Infinite Jest, said, "You'll become way less concerned with what other people think of you when you realise how seldom they do." I love that. We do worry what others think of us, and at the end of the day, our own approval of ourselves is the most important thing. So I hope that you have 3 habits that you're going to ritualise, 3 promises that you're going to make to yourself to ensure that you thrive every day, that you bounce forward, that you grow as a person in the face of all of the challenges that we all face every day. And what I want to do is just to give you the opportunity to hop on to emmajbell.com, and I'd love to give you a free download of my book, The True You, which you can tell is all about authenticity, and there's a bit about self-care in there as well. We are about to release the wonderful videos that we have of the interviews with our 50 thrivers on this project as from next week. And when you sign up, you'll join my list and you'll get those videos coming through. So you'll get to meet Marie Cockburn, you'll get to meet Kenyatta, the wonderful Paul Smith, and many of the other amazing people that I have been so privileged to meet and to have changed my life. We'll also be releasing an ebook with 1 secret each at the end of May, the end of June and the end of July, and if you stay tuned, we will be sharing all 9 secrets that we've learned from our wonderful 50 thrivers on this global journey. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If anyone's got any questions or anything else that they want to share, please do. There will be questions that I have set or posed that will be shared with you by Paddy after this session. And I've posed those questions really from the point of view of you being able to get the very best out of this session and create a little bit of a manifesto for yourself, if you like, to thrive every day. And I wish you lots of luck and warmth with that. If anyone's got any questions, just type them out. Otherwise, we'll draw the session to a close. Thank you so much, everyone, for turning up today. I wish you were in the room with me, but I hope that each of you have got something out of the session.